that's fine.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Finance and Resources Committee. Could I ask everyone to note the fire safety instruction that on hearing the alarm, you should leave the chamber via the double doors at the back, exit the building through the main entrance and congregate in the car park. Also, please switch off your mobile phones and turn any other electronic devices being used to silent. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is subject to an internet webcast recording where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the public area of the council chamber, it is likely that your image will be captured by the recording cameras and result in your image becoming part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human rights. If you wish to avoid this, you should leave the public seating area of the council chamber and move to the upper public gallery. If members are for any reason not present for the whole debate on an item, you should consider and seek advice as necessary on whether it would be appropriate for you to vote on that item. May I remind members to declare any interest when this item is raised on the agenda. Okay, we move to item 1, apologies for absence. Ms. White, we have received any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Gordon and Councillor Slade is substituting this evening.
Okay. And Councillor Hurst.
Please may I also give the apologies of Councillor Wagland, who has been difficult to locate.
Sorry, I missed that. Sorry, he's
Difficult. We can't find her.
I'm not going to comment, Councillor Hurst. I'm not going to rise to that one. Okay, but thank you for letting us know. Thank you. Okay. Just to clarify, Amy, if Councillor Wagland does appear, obviously she can take part in items or whoever, providing it's at the start of the item, yep? Okay, so we're all in agreement with that, that's fine, no problem at all. Okay, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations to be made? No? Okay, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on 25th of June. Is it agreed that I sign these minutes as a true record for the meeting held on 25th of June, which begins on page 5 of the agenda? Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Okay. Right, item 4 is the Chair's report, and that begins on page 13 of the agenda and updates members on the work that's been undertaken as part of the committee's remit. Before I take any questions, I'd like to ask Ms Barnes to provide a verbal update just on the parking side of things. Phoebe, could you give us an update, please?
Thank you, Chair. Stuart Anderson would have been here tonight, but he's stuck on the A127. So the update regarding parking is regarding the ANPR and barrier systems. Work is continuing behind the scenes to expand and install the ANPR systems in a number of the council's car parks. Work has been completed on the Eagle Way car park with all the wiring and power intake now completed. We are progressing work with Metric on Chatham Way and William Hunter Way with all the required site visits now taking place. Civil works to alter the entrance and exit at William Hunter Way to accommodate the barrier system is due to commence imminently. I'm aware that a meeting on site with Highways is planned for next week. And cabling and civil works at Chatham Way are also completed, ready for the installation of ANPR and the barrier equipment. We've made the application to the Essex County Council to alter the highway as well, so we can widen the exit from William Hunter Way car park as well. Regarding the new parking machines, we've raised the purchase order for this with Metric, who are allocating stock from the production facility for Hunters and Friars, the Town Hall and King George's Plainfield car parks. Due to pre-existing commitments, it's anticipated these sites will be installed in the first quarter of the new calendar year at the latest. The payment app obviously continues to perform without any issue as intended, and the team are making regular checks regarding any fraudulent activity around the use of false QR codes and action taken when this is found. Regarding the parking strategy, we've now engaged our consultants to undertake a review and refresh the council's existing car parking strategy to ensure it recognises the relevant changing environment with the parking sector. The review is scheduled to be completed in January and therefore we'll be reporting it to the February committee. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. We'll come to questions in a moment. Just a couple of points on the Chair's update. On page 13, there's reference to the Shopfront Improvement Grant Scheme. Most of you know with the UK SPF fund, we did improvement grants for shops in Brentwood, Shenfield and Ingatestone. Okay. What we are proposing to do is going to be a report coming to the next meeting of this committee. We're proposing within this financial year to put some funding into a shop grant scheme for areas outside of the bid area. So this is areas outside of Brentwood, Shenfield and Ingatestone. For example, places like Worley Hill, shops in Hutton, some of the shops out in the villages as well. So if they wished to apply for a shopfront improvement grant, there's an opportunity for them to also do so, because we think it's important to offer it and expand the opportunity. But a report will come back in November with the detail. Okay. I draw that to your attention. The other things are as well with the job skills and health events. If any of you can, this is obviously cross-party, members of the administration, opposition members, if you can attend on October the 9th, please do so. It is an interesting event. I've been to the last couple that have taken place, and they are very, very good. The council do have a stand there, and we're always trying to ensure that we get you know, as many jobs actually available as we can. I know last time we did it, we actually managed to fill the vacancies that we had at the job fair, which was good, you know, up to a certain level. There were some obviously requiring a certain level of expertise, which we weren't able to do so, but we certainly filled some of them, so that was good news. So I'm going to open up to questions now. I'll start with Councillor Worsfold.
No, thank you very much, Chair. It's about the parking. I appreciate you may not have the detail at your fingertips, but in the Hunter Avenue car park in Shenfield, there are currently 3 machines, 2 of which have not worked for quite some time. One that hasn't worked for many years. I just would like to know how many we're replacing, because 1 would not be enough. 3 seems to be rather generous for a car park of that size. If you haven't got the information to hand, I understand. If you could let me know, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Barnes?
We will take that offline and respond. I don't have that information to hand.
No problem. I understand. Got Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. The shopfront improvement scheme or grant. When we've done this before, as you probably know, it's been through different parties or whatever. It's been a sort of dual funded with the owners of the shops. Is this how the scheme's going to work? Is it going to be sort of 50-50, or is it fully funded by the council?
My understanding, it will probably be 50-50. We're going to have the details obviously come to the next committee, but I think that will be the intention, yeah, because it can obviously get quite expensive and there's only so much money to go around. So, yeah, I think that's the case, but let's wait for the full detail, yeah? Okay, thank you. Anyone there's a report? No? Okay, great. I'm going to move on to item 5. Very pleased to invite Mrs. Folger, who's joined us tonight from Basden. Thank you for coming across. And this report begins on page 70 of the agenda. Is there anything you wish to add to the report, Ms. Folger?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for having me along. No, there is nothing further to add to the report, thank you. Obviously happy for any questions as well. Thank you.
Well, I have a recommendation there that committee endorses without changes the revenues and bends policy that was reviewed in June 2025. I'm going to move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
I will second that.
Thank you. Any comments? Anyone wish to make any comments? It's pretty straightforward. Councillor Hurst.
I was going to say just what you said there. It seems pretty straightforward. It looks as though we had the discussion in June. It looks as though that's been worked through and we are where we are. So I'm happy to support it.
Thanks very much. Okay. No one else? Right. I'm going to move to the vote. Sorry. Oh, Councillor Parker.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I haven't read this fully in depth, but it's everything in it is what we normally do. But what I failed to see was I know the idea of imposing the fine, so to speak, and not going to court and chasing, but as far as I can see, it doesn't actually say that if there is outstanding monies, that we're going to follow it up with court action to try and retrieve those sums. It sort of states that everything will be solved by the £70 and £100, but for my mind, there is always more money outstanding. I know there's a certain figure it's not worth going for, or in some cases we know that there's nobody to chase, but it just doesn't seem to say that we will follow up and take any action that's needed to get any back payments.
Mrs. Fuller, can you give me a comment, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, to answer the question, I think the process that you are referring to, I believe, is a recovery process for council tax. So for any amount outstanding of council tax, we would take the account through the court system to Magistrates Court for a liability order and pursue in that manner. That gives us the various options for recovering a debt. The penalties policy itself is setting out the points in which we would issue a penalty sort of in addition to the usual council tax debt, if you like. So to give an example, the most common case that we have is where a single person discount is in payment. Somebody has moved into a property and they haven't told us that they should no longer receive the discount. So in that case, depending on the circumstances, we may consider issuing a penalty. That penalty would be added to the account in addition to any other debt that that person may already have, and the penalty with the existing debt would both pursue through a recovery process. The penalty could be recovered in exactly the same way as any other council tax debt.
Great, thanks very much. No one else? Okay, I'm going to move to the vote. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you for coming anyway. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go on to item 6 now, the employer supported scheme. The report begins on page 31 of the agenda. Mrs. Mann, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add, but happy to take any questions.
Lovely, thanks very much. I understand from talking to Mrs. Mann that this is something obviously that's done by a number of other councils across Essex, so we aren't on our own in terms of doing this, but I do welcome the fact that we are supporting both of these initiatives. I'm sure there's a particular member who probably have to declare an interest who's probably pleased with supporting them as well, but no, I don't know. But I'm going to move the recommendations first that we have. I've got recommendations R1, R2. Do I have a seconder?
I'm very happy to second this item.
Okay, I'll open to the floor. Okay, Councillor Hurst, about that first. Yeah.
Okay, perhaps just in the interests of complete transparency, I am, of course, the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for the county, and therefore I have an interest in the employer-supported policing scheme, but it isn't a prejudicial interest. I am not the employer of police officers. That is the Chief Constable. So I honestly see no reason why I should have to absent myself from this debate.
No, sure. No.
Really, it's a very useful scheme. It really does give the opportunity to people to step forward and do something positive for their community, get involved in a slightly different way. It's parallel in many ways with the sort of release that people get for doing Army Reserve or military reserve activities, which is really welcome. It also means that, of course, the employer has someone with policing skills on their payroll. Never a bad thing. So from my perspective, it's a win-win-win situation. You end up with employees who are doing something that they feel is rewarding, and you end up with more skills in your workforce. So really pleased to see the council doing it. And similarly, actually, the fostering friendly accreditation, I think, is equally a really positive thing to be doing. There is a big need, not just for more police officers, but also for more foster parents across the county, perhaps even more pressing need for more foster parents. I think it is an amazing thing that these volunteers step forward to do, and really pleased to see it coming forward.
No, fully endorse that. Thank you, Councillor Hurst. Councillor Slade.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. It's just regarding page 38, regarding the fostering, regarding the entitlement, where I just have some questions. So it may be granted up to 5 days leave, but is that the case if, for instance, if you have a newborn? Because obviously if you have a child, you're entitled to maternity, paternity leave. But if you're fostering a newborn, is it a case that it's still only 5 days leave? And then it's good that obviously it applies to each partner, but then it goes on to say an employee of an approved foster care may be granted additional 5 days leave per year. But if that person's fostering more than one child, it just seems a very small amount of time to be allocated either for newborns and, like, you know, and if you're fostering 1, 2 or 3 children throughout the year.
It's a good questions. Mrs. Mann, any thoughts?
Thank you, Chair. The policy is something that is modelled off of the fostering network, so it's something that they recommend, is something that we adopt as part of the accreditation. I take on board your comments, and obviously if people do, approve this tonight, then obviously I can go back to fostering and obviously seek to kind of get some clarification. But they have to approve our policy anyway, so that's kind of the next step. So I could, again, it's something we can explore. We do adoption leave, so if somebody's adopting a child, then they get the same equivalent to maternity leave. So, but I think at the moment, this is a model policy that is used across other county, like across the county. So this is modelled on Essex County's policy. So that's what it's been modelled on.
I think if we could get further clarification, that would be helpful, because I do take the point, if you've got a newborn baby, 5 days isn't much, is it? So you certainly need potentially more time. So I think we just need to get clarification on that, and then what degree of flexibility have we got, or would we want? So if it needs to come back to committee, we can bring that back and just get clarity, because I think as with all these things, the devil is very much in the detail. And there's the theory side of it, and there's the reality, and it's how it actually works. So, yeah, that's great. If we can do that, it's okay? Okay. Yeah, sure. Councillor Mayo.
So just to follow up on that, I suppose what we need is clarity on what the paternity and maternity policy covers, whether that, as long as that isn't trumped by this, that's the sort of clarity I think we just need, just to follow up on that.
Ms. Mann.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of maternity and adoption, they are the same. So you're entitled, depending on your service, so if you take someone who's had a year's service with the council, they would be entitled to a whole year. Some of it paid, some of it unpaid, etc. I think this is more about supporting someone who wants to be a carer, and so it's not exactly, the same as if they're truly doing adoption. This is about supporting them through the process of being a foster carer, and then also giving them the time to attend the appointments that they might need going forward. But I do take the point, and I will seek that clarity. And in addition, if there are more than one foster child, whether that would increase as such. So I will check with the fostering network.
Okay. Is that okay, Councillor? Yeah, okay, lovely. Anyone else? No? Okay, I'm going to go to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Right, move on to now item number 7, which is the One Team Year 4 Q1 and Q update. This report begins on page 45 of the agenda. Obviously, this report is coming out, or is before us tonight, after the recent votes on LGR, and we know we're a long way to go down the road before we know exactly what's happening there. Possibly could be March next year, we don't know, but we do obviously have now 2 councils who've voted for 2 different scenarios. And obviously there's a potential third one, which is obviously the county one as well, and a fourth one with Thurrock. So none of us know exactly. But it must obviously be an interesting time, I'm sure, for staff in Rochford, because they are the only council at the moment that's obviously voted for their proposal. Greg, Ms Campbell, give us any thoughts, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's part of the consideration that we're moving forward with. I only had a meeting this afternoon with some Essex colleagues from different councils about how we're progressing the next stage, which is a difficult stage because between now and the actual announcement, which, as the Chair pointed out, is likely to be around March time next year. But there are things that we can do that means we can move some of the background on being prepared for what will happen, but obviously not going into too much of the detail because we don't know who we're going to likely be grouped with, whether it's Rochford or Brentwood side. What I can also say is that we're looking into when the agreement was struck, the Section 113 notice, and just how we actually pull apart at those points, but just at a high level at the moment. So we're going to be fully prepared in terms of how it will actually work. We have then got a period from March 26 onwards, up until vesting, which is a couple of years away, to make sure that we're all aligned with what needs to go on and making sure the term you'll probably hear a lot of the way forward is being safe and legal, and that is going to be the key concentration moving up to the point that we come together. But just to reassure everyone, one team is still working towards processes, policies that will support both organisations for the next 2 years, but also support the organisations whatever happens when we get to LGR. It'll put us in a strong position moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Mr Campbell. Before I come to any questions, I just want to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
I will second the recommendation.
Okay. Basic note in the report, but we're just moving it and doing it formally. Yeah, sorry, I just noticed that, yeah, move the report, yeah. Councillor. I do like to make sure you're aware, Councillor. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure that the officers are on top of this, but I just feel that I make a point that we shouldn't go too far down the road with things that might just not happen, you know, and waste the time on certain things and, you know, spend time and possibly money when we don't know what the outcome is going to be. Because I have heard suggestions that it's going to be a bit like the FA Cup with the ball when they pick out who we're going to be with, but I'm not sure that's going to happen.
I think it's one of those things where you can, well, it's happened already, you can spend an awful lot of time hypothecating in terms of what might happen, yeah? And I think for those of us who like to deal with what we know and get on with what we know rather than going round and round in circles, I prefer what we know. But I have sympathy for the officers because, you know, it is an uncertain time. Yeah, it's people's jobs, their futures, everything else. Obviously, we've got the situation on the other side, looking in terms of the impact on our residents and for those members who are going to carry on going forward to the unitary. Obviously, that's a whole different ball game from what we're doing at the moment. But until we know the details, who knows? You know, it's up in the air, isn't it? Councillor Hurst.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with you. It is a period of substantial uncertainty, isn't it? And that must be sympathy for the officers who are going through it. My question really is, what feedback can the officers here give us about how morale is? I mean, we've got the report in front of us about Q1 and Q2 updates, so we've got facts in front of us, but actually feelings really matter in this sort of environment. I know, because in my other life I've had to have a look at how the reorganisation is working, and as you probably all know, the role of Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner is one of those things which is being, changed. Well, it's going. let's be honest. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I'm looking at it from another perspective as well, but one of the things that sort of strikes one from looking at the facts around areas that have already gone through it is almost everywhere there has been slippage in service provision. And I think it's realistic to understand why. Yeah, people find it difficult when they don't know what their job's going to be like to keep on committing the same level of discretionary effort that they normally do to that job. But there's also a question really for our senior officers about what plans do we have in hand to try and make sure that that is kept to an absolute minimum, because local government reorganisation may or may not be a good thing. It may lead to super streamlined, massively efficient councils in the future, more accountable to their public and agile and nimble than we have at the moment. Fingers crossed, but we have to get there. And there is a really big job, I think, for the senior management of our organisations to make sure we get there in as good a shape as we possibly can. Yeah, next March we will be hearing about what shape it may be, but really it's 2.5 years that we have to get through and keep delivering proper, good services to our residents from where we are today.
Thanks for that, Councillor. I think you touch on a key point. I think motivation, momentum amongst staff is going to be an interesting. Yeah, very much so. Going to be an interesting one. Mr. Campbell, anything you wanted to comment on that?
All I would say at the moment is we have brought it up at staff briefings. We're being very open, honest about the position. I think that's the best approach for us. We're talking to staff. We've had a staff engagement earlier in the year where their feelings were made known to us about concerns they have, and we addressed them. So we're actually working on the next stage, which is also the comms plan. I think that's going to be vitally important about how we engage and different ways we can engage. Whilst we can't, give them any certainty, as you point out, we can give them certainty on the process, what will happen at certain stages. And that's where we're kind of at the moment, but just thinking about for the next 6 months, then actually building some comms around when the announcement is made and being prepared and ready for that. What's important that isn't lost on us is absolutely what you said, which is the business as usual. We've got to carry that on for the next 2.5, 3 years, even longer, because all the councils won't come together instantly. There's still work that needs to go on. We want to maintain and retain the staff that we've got at the moment, and that's difficult anyway in the climate that we have. So we're going to work really hard on that, and it's not lost, and it's been a conversation that has already been had a couple of times. If that reassures as much as I can at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Campbell.
I'll come back with a follow-up.
Yeah, Councillor.
Chair. So, just for good governance purposes, is it this committee which actually has oversight of what is being done to maintain business as usual services and morale and commitment and spirits over that 2.5 year period, or where does the scrutiny of that, where does the governance of that fall, please?
Campbell, can you clarify on that, please?
So I believe it does come to this committee. I will check to make sure, so I haven't actually taken it from anyone else, but I believe it does come back to this committee. Whereas if there's any major decisions, they may go to full council, but I don't think there are any. I think it's more about updating, keeping that going. But once we've actually got a comms plan and something in place, maybe it is a regular briefing to committee, just so that you're kept aware of it.
We'll get clarity. I mean, from my perspective, the key thing it's obviously just Mr. Campbell's responsibility of all the directors and managers across the organisation. They've all got a key part to play, because it's about their relationships with staff, supporting staff through the whole process. So certainly from a reporting perspective, my understanding is it will come back to here. But I think you've taken on board, Mr. Campbell, the sort of sentiments that just in the actual practical side of it. Once we do know what's happening, how we're managing that process and where it goes, I think it'd be good to obviously get that update, which I know you'll give us. That's fine. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. Page 47.1.11, we state work on this issue and how devolution and local government reorganisation may affect the two authorities, the services provided, the areas involved and the financials is now being considered. One, should we include in there the strategic partnership? So should it read the two authorities, the strategic partnership, the services provided and the areas involved? That's my first question. And regarding the financials that are now being considered, I can't remember if I've read this correctly, but I'm sure I've read in a report that both Brentwood and Rochford had set aside £250,000 for devolution. So if I'm correct in remembering that correctly, is that part of the financials that are now being considered? And if so, should that be included in that point?
Come to Ms Dixon first on the financial side. Any comments, Ms Dixon?
Thank you, Chair. The 250 is set aside for work on local government reorganisation predominantly and devolution, so it wouldn't be included in these figures. Yeah.
Okay. Ms Campbell, any comments on that at all?
For me, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's implied that it takes into account the one team across the two organisations. Next time when we say it, we can spell it out more succinctly. But yeah, it does just imply that, I think.
I think my personal view is, I mean, the wording, if you like, is quite general. I mean, as with all these things, depends how much detail you want to go to. So I think I take on board your sentiment, and I think officers acknowledge that. It is something we need to obviously look at. I mean, the financials are being looked at all the time. So, you know, but I'll take on board your point. Okay, I'm going to move forward. We're basically asking everyone to note the report. Is that noted? Yep, noted? Yep, thank you. Okay, great. We move on to item 8, which is the formal complaints annual report. And this report begins on page 53 of the agenda. Ms Meek, do you have anything you wish to add?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I will move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
I will second the recommendation.
Okay. I suppose, Ms Meek, a question that the obvious question will come up, why has this come here to this committee? Where would it normally go? And why have we had this great opportunity thrust upon us? Ms Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. There are actually two reports before you this evening that refer to performance. Under the Constitutional Working Party earlier this year, members agreed that actually it should be the service or the policy committees that should be in charge of performance, which sits under their committee. So you have responsibility because you look after it and you make decisions on it. You should also see the performance that's within your remit. That's why they were split out amongst those committees rather than going to where they previously were to a scrutiny committee. But none of the members in this committee would have seen anything or any of the indicators that related to their committee. Therefore, we changed that. The CWG agreed with that. And now before you is that happening, which is the indicators and the complaints that refer directly to this committee.
Right, okay, thank you for that. I would just ask, I'm going to come out to questions in a moment, so this will be coming back to this committee next year. Is that correct, Ms Campbell? Yep.
Yes.
That's great, okay. Right, first person, Councillor Worsfold.
Thank you very much, Chair. Interesting, and the first time it's come to this committee. My comments are about the data in it and the way it's presented. On page 61, we've got that graph of the complaints received over a 5-year period. And I looked at that and I thought, well, that doesn't look very good. Then I looked at where it started, and it starts in the COVID years, which would strike me as being not terribly representative. I think it'd be much better if we could have a longer time frame to see what the trends are over a 10-year period. Because 2020 and 2021 can't have been representative. Simple as that, isn't it? Because the world was in a very different place. And then I'd like to know whether we could have some comparative data, because it's nicely broken down and it's nicely presented. But is it good, bad or indifferent? Because there's no comparison with general local authority data or other local authorities of a similar size and configuration to Brentwood. And I think that would be very helpful for us to see. And also in comparative data would be year on year, because there's some nice charts in here, and on page 64 it says significant improvements been achieved since the 2023-24 period, and this may be to do with the lack of continuity of going from one committee to another. But we haven't got the 2023-24 data, and I'd like to see for myself whether that judgment of significant improvement is valid and what significant improvement looks like. So my plea is, can we have a report that is richer in data? Because I think that will enable us to understand what is happening in this very important field of complaints. If people have a problem, we want them to complain. We want them to tell us, because if they don't speak up, we can't fix it. So complaints are important. They're a good yardstick of how we're doing across all sorts of service areas. So absolutely want to see it. I'd just like to see more. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll take on board that point. I'm sure Mr. Campbell will give us some comment on that. A couple of observations I'd make. We've obviously got the stage 1 complaints on page 62, and if you look at waste, for example, stage 1 complaints received, and then stage 1 upheld, part upheld, and then you move to page 63, and the difference obviously is, in the upheld, the stage 2 complaints. It's a massive, massive difference. And so I think it's important to sort of putting things in perspective, and I'm sure, I may be wrong, but Councillor Worsfold, you might want to at some stage obviously drill down to as to what the 77 were, why they went to 45, and how you ended up with the 2, because that's obviously how you can learn something. And I think it's the same across all those different committees. The chairs having that information, that level of detail is quite useful. Ms. Campbell, any thoughts on what Councillor Worsfold said, please?
Thank you, Chair. My thoughts are I will hand over to Stephanie Meek to answer that question. Thank you.
Stephanie.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Yes, on the comparative data, that's definitely something we can add in. I do think it would be useful for you to have that year by year, so you can see. In terms of the longer period to represent, it would be worth noting as well, I think over the last 10 years, complaints have significantly increased because we are more welcome to taking complaints. It's easier to make a complaint, but that's definitely something we can put in there as well. It's also worth noting, the complaints handling code that's recently come out from the local government ombudsman and the housing ombudsman. So again, that's why we've seen the kind of jump in complaints there. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hurst next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I feel a little bit as though these reports are pursuing me. I mean, it used to be on scrutiny, I used to have to look at them there, and here I am with them again. Are they after me? But more seriously, clearly they have been divvied up because the larger part of complaints has historically always been housing. And I would understand they're presumably with the Housing Committee now, and we aren't getting to see them. What we did find useful at scrutiny, and at scrutiny we used to get it quarterly rather than annually. Maybe that was too frequent, but annually is quite infrequent. What we used to do there was actually have a working group of the members, subgroup, not everybody, and have the opportunity in quite a time to actually probe a bit deeper in just the way you were describing to Councillor Worsfold there. So we could actually go in and say, so how do you go from 77 to 45 to 2? And what were the 2? And actually probe in a bit of depth as to what's happened there and what needs to be done differently. And then the summary report, as we have here, came to the committee and was discussed as we're discussing it now. But members had a bit more in-depth knowledge because they'd been through that process. I wonder whether you would agree that it would be a good idea to do that here with the data set that's going to be coming here, perhaps on a semi-annual rather than annual basis, but actually to have a couple from each side, 3 or 4 people sitting down and going through that in that detail. It was really helpful.
I think it's a good idea. I suppose my only thought process, because Councillor Worsfold's thoughts on this, would be whether you took your specific case here, the 77 down to 45, and then the 2, if you took that down to the waste, to the Clean and Green Committee, and they looked at that as the Clean and Green members, and you went through that, because you are the ones in effect who are going to be looking at that on a regular basis and taking the decisions at committee level. Now, I think it's something, what we do, Councillor, is we'll take back, if you like, the thought in terms of give it some thought about should it go to committee or should it come back here. I think it should certainly be looked at. Got no problem with that. It's a question of who's looking at it. And, yeah.
It's a very good point around it. So how have we decided, given that the housing complex are clearly going to housing, how have we decided what comes here and what goes to Clean and Green, and you know, what are the relative responsibilities? But the ones that we are responsible for understanding and governing, I think we should have a little bit more time to probe into, and perhaps, as I say, on a semi-annual rather than annual basis.
I certainly think the semi-annual side is, again, makes sense. I think, Mr Campbell, perhaps if you could look at that angle, because there are ones which obviously I think come under the terms and conditions of this committee and would definitely be our responsibility to address, but there are specific ones which would come under housing or waste, or maybe the Communities Committee, Housing and Communities Committee, I don't know. Can we look at that, Mr Campbell, and just see what we can do? Because I'm conscious and keen that the committee members themselves, you're going to be making decisions going forward, and it's almost like policy that you're going to be deciding that can make a difference on this. So can we come back and have a look at that, Mr Campbell?
Certainly, Chair, I think we can. The one thing I would say, we've got later in the agenda, and it's probably the wrong way around, we've got the quarterly performance report that is later and should have probably come before this one, which gives a bit more detail. Yeah, that comes to here, and then this would follow that normally. So maybe that will help. So once we get onto that, got no problems looking at it. Let's have a look at that one later if it's okay, Chair. Yeah. But we'll certainly take it offline and then report back.
But I understand the point you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Got Councillor Barrett next. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. I should say, to Councillor Hurst's point, my first subgroup I ever served on was the complaints working group or committee, and it's quite an interesting experience. I hear Councillor Worfeld's point on complaint history, but I can remember it being, I think it was back in 2014, where it was a decision that all complaints had to be registered through the online form, and suddenly complaint numbers dropped, shockingly. But now the complete reverse situation, where actually officers are actively saying, could this be considered a complaint, and putting it in is actually a very positive thing, and actually means we address things earlier, and in terms actually bring things forward. So I think the historical reference may not be easy to do, because there's certainly at one stage in my length of service was a period where make it harder, the same as make it harder for an FOI, the same theory, if you can bring the numbers down by making it very difficult, but that's not actually a good sign, a sign of good service or openness or that kind of thing. So I think we have to be relatively careful when we consider those kind of items and historic measures. In turn, I think it's really important we look at the upheld number as well. People, while seeking a complaint and people being angry, was it actually relevant is really important here as well. In turn, I'm more than happy to receive the 2 not upheld assets complaints to the Assets Committee for information on what they were and why they were not upheld. But I think there's a bit of a reflection on that here in terms of looking at, and sometimes there also may be some level of equivalence of people are complaining about things, but actually we're not upholding it. So why are they complaining? What is it that they consider to be a different level of service? There's 2 parts of this. Are officers delivering on expectations? Actually, the fact that very few complaints are upheld for me is a very good sign in terms of even if they're complaining, they're actually hitting the service level we're asking them for. But at the same time, that someone's complaining normally also indicates they don't consider the service level we think is right to be right. So also useful information for us. There's lots of things here that could be useful, but I'm in a weird scenario of actually quite liking more complaints because we can do more with them rather than not knowing what people don't like and then we can't do anything about it. So this is good. More scrutiny, I think Councillor Hurst's point is relevant, but in terms of, I think actually Councillor Wolf doesn't need to know the number of complaints. He needs to know what were they on, what were they upheld about, and why, and had they returned. So have we heard a complaint, upheld it, and then the same complaint returns 3 months later? That's the worst case scenario for us, rather than actually finding a problem, fixing it's great, finding a problem, not fixing it, bad.
Yeah. No, you're right, but it comes back to the policy side. It may be a policy decision that Councillor Worsfold's committee needs to take, yeah, to change it and make sure we get the complaints down next time round. Okay. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Councillor Worsfold said that the graph looks quite horrible to a certain extent, going up and going up each year. I don't know if the members suffer the same problem that I do. When the complaints that I get are generally from the first thing they say is, I've been on the council and I've been fobbed off or put onto somebody else, I can't get any answer, and so on and so forth. I don't think it's unique with me. I think it happens to all councillors. And if you take the number of complaints that end up not being a complaint, if you like, and is washed out, it seems to me, I don't know how it would work, but it seems the first contact, whether it's through a phone call or through somebody visiting the town hall, it would seem that a lot of these complaints could be done away with at source, and they wouldn't go to from stage 1 to stage 2, because if you look at stage 2, it shrunk to such an amount which doesn't represent the graph we've got on page 61, which just shows it going up and up. And as I say, from my point of view, the complaints I get, or the observations I get, is the residents feeling that they're not getting an answer when they phone in or when they come to the council, and they then revert back to probably the councillors, or they put in a formal complaint, which ends up not being a complaint, if you like. So I don't know if it's can be worked that some of the questions and things that people need to know are done at source when they first complain, when they first come to the telephone call. I mean, I've had one this week where and you take it with a pinch of salt because you only get one side of the story, but the particular resident said that he'd phoned up 4 times about a various problem, then had another problem and phoned up about that, had no answers, didn't know where to go to, could I point him in the right direction? Well, I answered his complaint without any problem, so why couldn't it have been answered by somebody when he spoke to him on the phone? So I just feel we might be letting ourselves down at the point of contact.
Okay, I mean, to me, it's a fair point you make. Ms. Meek, just on the general complaints that come through, and if you like, what we can learn from those, yeah. Just welcome your, in terms of how much you and anyone else is looking at those in the first instance to say, exactly what Councillor Parker said, could this have been handled in a different way? How could we have simplified the situation? How could we have provided the answer, rather than going direct to the councillor? I mean, what tends to happen in so many cases is a lot of people quite a few people do try themselves to tackle something. It's a resident. I'm sure we've all got people who will contact us on a regular basis. Can you sort this out? Because they want to go through the councillor. But just your thoughts on the point that Councillor Parker's raised, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Parker. That's a good point. So we actually do have a definition of what a complaint is within our policy, and we also state in there that we don't call it a stage 0 complaint, but it's when it comes in as a service request. And in those instances, we will direct the customer, well, actually, we can log that for you and pass that to the service, whatever that may be. It will be in a case where perhaps the service has then not carried out the action that they should do, or it's happened a second time. In that case, it would go to a stage 1 complaint. So within the complaints administration team, they all reviewed when they come in to see whether that is a service request or it should be raised to a stage 1 complaint. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, I think the general principle, and I'm sure it happens in all organisations, not just council, but commercial organisations, is when issues or complaints come through, there are different levels, if you like, of ownership that people take. Some people take it very, very conscientiously and own that problem till it's resolved. Others perhaps aren't quite the same. And I think, where it's a recurring theme, then obviously we do need to look at that, as any organisation does, because we're not providing the service that we should be. Yeah. Okay. Yep, fair point. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. So with pages 62, 63, obviously housing's not listed, but obviously I'm assuming that's because it's not part of the terms of the conditions. But then on page 65, including the reasons for complaint in the pie chart, you've got housing there, service 16%, that primary housing repairs. So is that pie chart then reflective of the information on page 62 and page 63?
I will ask Mr Campbell.
Hold on. Hold on.
Swiftly move on. Yeah, I'm sure.
And obviously, if with the 16% that includes housing repairs, then that's external because that will be housing repairs are Axis. So are they our complaints or are they Axis complaints? So, and then touching just on Councillor Parker's point, I've had to deal recently with several residents all being informed the same incorrect information by a customer service advisor, and it's relating to information that concerns the depot. So I was then going to suggest that possibly some of the customer service advisors should be per department rather than be general, because, and to be fair, that's my other point, is I'm actually going to raise this as a complaint, but then I'm a councillor, so would my complaint then be included in this, or is this just residents only? And just to inform you what my complaint is that I've had from easily 7 residents throughout different parts of the borough, are that when they call to see if it's possible, if they can have either the blue or white bags delivered, they're told they're not. 5 of those residents are assisted collections, so they have difficulty in leaving the property, and also they were not informed that they could receive smaller bags. Now, I've dealt with all of those. I've gone and got the bags, I've delivered them, they were grateful for the smaller bags, but everyone has all asked, why wasn't we given this information? Why was we just told, you come to the town hall, that's the only way that you can receive blue bags?
I mean, on that point, if we get ones, I mean, obviously, you know, you can make a complaint, same as I can, any member can, but I think when we get issues like that, if we come through direct to Ms Meek, because there's obviously a general problem that we've got, and we need to address that, and we need to address it quickly, and we need clarification. Because if you've experienced that, the danger is other people will as well, and it all starts to get a bit silly. But I think on that point, Ms Meek, I think it's a question of the, you know, the bags or the food caddies or whatever, because food caddies comes up often. You've got to come up here to get your food caddy. How does that work, etc. So perhaps for the customer service team, get some more details offline, maybe from Councillor Slade, but the customer service team, if we just be sure we're clear on that, that'd be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Yeah, regarding that bit of information, we'll definitely take that away. In terms of any collections from the town hall for general, they predominantly won't do it, but obviously that's Clean and Green's decision. However, for those assisted collections, it's really important that we are delivering that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. In terms of when you mentioned the pie chart on page 65, it was included the housing complaints in there just to give that picture of what the general trends were coming into the council. So I think it's really important to mention that there's a big percentage on time and delay, and that was across housing and all the other services as well, hence why that was included. In terms of the repairs complaints, as we mentioned, that was in a separate report to the Housing Committee, and any complaints that were involved with the contractor, that's all broken down within that one as well. But yeah, it was just to kind of give a bigger picture, so hopefully that answers that question for you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hurst again.
Thank you for going back to me. Just one final one, really. So you've got the service delivery plan in here, which is really good to see, and it tells us what you're going to address and in what time frame, but it doesn't tell us what impact you think it's going to have. If you do all that's in the service delivery plan by the time it's supposed to be done, what happens to complaints? Do they continue to go up or do they go down?
Ms. Week?
Yep, good question. I still would consider them to go up because that is the trend that we're seeing. Like we said, we are pushing forward to make the complaint service easy for people and to raise those concerns. So it is bringing us that feedback. In terms of the internal governance around it, they are going to each board before it then goes to the performance report that comes to the committee as well. So it's trying to get that bigger picture, as we mentioned before, of those trends and so that they don't happen again. So hopefully that sort of answers the question, but we'll continue to... More complaints, but different ones, but we'll, continue to work on them best we can.
Okay, thank you, Sweet, for your responses there, and Ms Campbell, and for the some questions, some very good questions there, appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Okay, lovely, thank you very much. Right, we move on to item 9, which is the digital strategy, including cyber strategy. Report begins on page 73 of the agenda. I'm going to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder for recommendations?
I will second the recommendations.
Okay. Just before we get into this, there is obviously a side to this item which relates to members. And I would ask opposition members just to pass on to your colleagues. You were recently sent a survey regarding IT requirements. This is member IT requirements, okay? If you could just mention to your colleagues, could they ensure they reply? Because we do want to get 100% response in terms of what people want, okay? We are definitely making changes on member IT. The real driving force on this is around this whole cyber security angle. It's absolutely vital that as a council we get it as tight as we can do, and member IT is one of those key areas. So what's happened, I've spoken to the officers, Ms Bennett, about this. We've got various members who are at different levels of IT expertise. What we have said is whatever your level of expertise is, if you need more help than others, you'll be given that help and you'll be taken, if you like, by the hand and guided through the process and supported as much as possible. Because in fairness, there are a number of people, you know, who've got their IT sorted, they've got a way of doing things, they've got into a routine, and they're very happy with that, and they don't particularly want to change. And I can understand that. But unfortunately, because of cybersecurity, we have to do that. So that's why we're taking these steps. This report is obviously looking at a much wider issue about cyber strategy and security. And it's an issue that comes up obviously at previous scrutiny committees and audit committees in terms of you know, cyber safety and the danger of being hacked, etc., etc. So to start with, Ms Bennett, is there anything you wish to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Just really wanted to highlight that the digital strategy proposed is to take us to 2028. It's a really key strategy for us to support the Council's transformation plans and also aims to support our LGR readiness. So you will notice a key theme within it is about how do we build on existing technology rather than technology, wholesale technology transformation with an eye on the changes that are arising from LGR. The action plan has been intentionally developed for the short to medium term, so the outcomes of the LGR process can then, the impact of that can be directed, can direct how we allocate our resources. As the Chair's mentioned, we've also got a cybersecurity strategy in front of you tonight that sets out 3 themes. How do we prevent an attack? How do we educate our users, that's officers and members, to detect a potential attack? And how do we use then technology responsibly in how we respond to an attack? So quite broad, the information you've got in front of you tonight, but myself and Mr Huggins are here to take any questions.
Thanks, Ms Bennett. What I would say, I was down at my party conference down in Bournemouth, and I was talking, went to a very interesting meeting with colleagues who'd gone through the whole unitary process, right from the beginning, right the way through the other side, and they're now running unitary authorities. And we were talking to obviously some of the key issues they faced. One of the big ones, quite not surprisingly, is IT. I think where we are fortunate in Essex is there's quite a lot of common ground on IT across Essex in terms of different systems that are shared. But in one particular instance, I was talking to people, simple things such as having a Teams meeting was difficult in the new unitary authority because a number of the councils weren't set up. Some were set up for Zoom, some for Team, and everything else. Sounds quite basic and simple to us, but it's quite fundamental because if you're trying to communicate, you need to have a team set up, don't you? So, yeah, it's important. Obviously, that's looked at going forward. In terms of comment, Councillor Barrett, we've got first.
Thank you, Chair. I want to welcome this and thank Ms Huckins and the entire IT team and directors, etc. as well. I think it's an interesting, challenging time for IT infrastructure in general and any digital strategy, given everything is changing at a pace we haven't seen and every risk is changing at a pace we haven't seen, and the joys of, I know we're coming to AI later, but everything from when we look at the Redcar attack as being a kind of example of where things went really wrong for local authorities, actually that attack was comparatively unsophisticated compared to what's happening at Jaguar Land Rover right now, and different methods, different technologies, etc. So part of me is I actually like the headline nature of this policy and its adaptability, because for me, it's a 25 to 28 strategy and then we need to almost start again. But actually what I quite like about this is elements of it that allow us to update and move on and think actively as threats change. Because frankly, the worst thing we could possibly have is that we need to come back to a physical committee of such as this to say, actually, we've got a pretty major security risk that needs major change, but we're going to wait till November until passing a policy we can actually do something about it. It's potentially the worst case outcome we've got. And in turn, I think this is a step forward. It sets things out more clearly. The language you use is at the right level that I can understand it, when I don't actually understand a lot of digital strategy, so I welcome that in general, but I think it's a very positive report, and I welcome A, its approach, and B, the adaptability of actions being put forward, and nature that while things are intended, it's a live approach where risks change, where opportunities change, and we adapt as appropriate. So for me, this is a successful example of a strategy for the 21st century, that seems so long ago now, strategy for now, for which is a difficult time for us all. For the future, there we go, which is a scary thought. But yes, thank you for this. I think it's a positive offering. It offers some challenges, it offers some outcomes, but in turn it feels to me as a first truly kind of attempt at a living strategy in this space, and that's really positive. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. Yep, that's welcome your comments. I've got Councillor Parker next.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, my only feelings on this is what I said on an early agenda item. I think the officer and yourself has sort of answered my questions or answered my query in terms of we're going so far and we're going careful and we're doing this and doing that. But as I say, my observation is that because we're in a situation, strategy development on 1.1, first paragraph is fine. The second paragraph goes down to what I see as a problem, in as much that the local government devolution, because we don't know what it is, you know, that's a problem. I know that Essex County is talking, or you're talking to Essex County. I know all the other boroughs are talking to Essex County, but I just worry that we could fall into the of going too far on the cyber attacks and so forth for our own council are very important, and that goes without saying, and that has to be looked at and progressed. But going forward, where we're looking for something that fits the overall Essex situation as it is going to turn out, are we going to end up with councils doing this there and other councils doing that there, and we end up with a logjam that doesn't work at the end of the day in two or three years' time? I'm sure the IT departments will say to me, no, we've got all of this in hand, but and I'm not an IT person, but I can read, and a lot of the IT systems, particularly in local government and big organisations, have gone down that path where they suddenly find it doesn't work. So I just worry that we might go too far too soon.
Well, I take on board your point. I think from talking to the officers, and we'll get Ms Bennett's comments in a moment, but there does seem to be, as I understand it, a fair amount of synergy across Essex in terms of different systems already. You know, there's a lot of common practice across there, whereas I think there's other parts of the country where it is quite different, okay? So the key is obviously going to be is who we link up with at a very, very early stage. You know, what is their IT capability, what's our IT capability, and I'm sure they're going to be burrowing away in terms of, you know, into their detail. But Ms Bennett, any thoughts on Councillor Parker's comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Essex is, as the Chair refers, is in a good place in terms of working together. There's a very strong digital partnership across Essex. There's a good understanding of what the systems network across Essex looks like, where there's synergy, where there's not, where alignment could possibly front run any LGR decisions. So we're in a good place with that. That's recognised with third parties that we speak to and other council areas that we speak to, that it's kind of an enviable position that Essex are in, because there is an understanding. What we don't want to do is stand still and not do anything, but you're right, everything's got to balance that decision on what are the right decisions to make locally and what are those decisions that if we made now need to consider others. There's also ambition to do things across Greater Essex, not just necessarily with any unitary that we're aligned with. So there's lots of conversations happening. It's very much a live matter across Essex. It's very much something that Mr Huggins and I are engaged in actively. Mr Huggins actually chairs the Essex Digital Partnership, which is a really key position for us. So yeah, that's the only assurance I can provide you really, that we are all working together. We have got our eye on what might work together, what might not work together, what might be a bigger challenge. Data, for example, is something that we know we need to start working on early. All those things have sort of started to be highlighted. Security is something we can likely work on early. But there's no denying it will be a huge challenge, and I think the Chair's recognised that at events that he's been at recently.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Hurst next.
Yes, thank you very much. I really welcome seeing both the strategies come forward. As others have said, I think they are clear and understandable, and something that we'll be able to use as an organisation. Just on the cyber security angle, I think I've said this before to some, but perhaps not to all. I also need to declare an interest because I'm a board member, but there is the Eastern Region Cyber Security Centre, which is police sponsored, which provides free advice on how to keep your organisation safe from cyber attack. I know in the past I've been told, no, we've got our own advisors, we don't need the police structure. But I believe that our own advisors let us down a bit sometime in the last 6 months. I would just reiterate, my urge that we actually sign up to the Eastern Region Cyber Security Centre, because it will help with some free advice, and they're linked into people like GCHQ who do an awful lot of clever work around this stuff.
Thank you for that. Councillor Worsfold.
Thank you very much. I found the officer's response to Councillor Parker's points very reassuring, because this is a wonderfully comprehensive report, and it sets out a very ambitious work programme, and there are an awful lot of items there that say not started or just in progress. And that then raises a question, how do we prioritise? Clearly, the cyber security has got to be right at the top of the list, because that a cyber attack would cripple us, and it would affect a lot of residents very adversely, very quickly. So it could be absolutely top of the list. After that, this is why I found the answer very reassuring. I think we have to say, where can we best use the skills, knowledge and expertise that we've got to produce solutions that could best be described as gold standard. So where can we go into these discussions about local government reform, talking to other Essex authorities and saying, we believe we've got the best in breed solution to this challenge. And I think that's where we need to put our efforts. If other people are doing things in some of these areas where they're already ahead of us, well, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's pinch what they're doing and import that. So my plea is, and as I said, I thought the answer was very reassuring, that I think that thinking seems to be already into the mix, is let's concentrate on the things where we can come out of it with something that is really good, that obviously enhances our, but which we can with great confidence, share with other people and say, this is good. Now, what have you got that's good that we can pinch?
Yeah, I think you touched on an important point there, Councillor Worsfold, because I know Councillor Cloak and I were talking about members' portal. Did you want to say something on members' portal, Councillor Cloak, or not? Go on, just a thought.
Yeah, the members' portal isn't just a case in point. We've got some work here for this year, apparently. We already did work on the portal fruitlessly, in my opinion, a couple of years ago. And we're probably going to not need the members' portal when we undergo the LGR process, because there's probably 10 other members' portals that will be considered and the best one selected, which I'm moderately confident is not going to be ours. Anyway, what I don't quite follow is some of the timelines in here as well, apart from my judgment on the members' portal. That's, you know, down as a concise piece of work for this year, but there's no statement on there about, oh, LGR may affect this. There's nothing about what's going to happen with it next year. It's just we're doing something with it this year. There's an action plan. So, you know, if that one thing, which was easily picked out by me in a matter of seconds, is representative, I would like to see a little bit more thought on the whole action plan and all the things that are under there, because it doesn't seem to me like it's very hard to unpick some of this stuff.
Thoughts on that?
Thank you, Chair. The action plan was difficult. There's so much to IT and to delivering digital. So well, you could almost call some of those, what we've defined as those work streams, as just the headlines, and there will be multiple deliveries that fall under a lot of those. So you're right, Review Members Portal is a very, very broad statement, and there's lots of work going on underneath that. There is work actively taking place on that now that we will be reporting to members soon. Again, that's a whole raft of deliverables that fall underneath that, but that's very difficult to define without totally overwhelming an action plan. I think what we have committed within the report to come back and report on the action plan, and I think when we report specifically on the action plan, we will try and be much more specific with you about what exactly those deliverables have been, and try and assign some more specific dates to where we haven't yet completed deliverables, so that you've got a little bit more detail and clarity. But alongside the strategy again today, it would have been a bit overwhelming, I think, to have overdone the action plan. But I take your point that it doesn't actually tell you anything too tangible, some of those statements. So yeah, I take your point. Thank you.
Just touching on something Councillor Worsfold and Councillor Cloak have said of the members' portal. Looking at something obviously prior to LGR, but Councillor Worsfold made the point about a gold standard in a particular item. So, for example, the members' portal. I mean, we've probably got 15 different members' portals across Essex, yeah? And I'd have thought from an IT perspective, someone must have identified where one is better or a lot better than the other. And in simple terms, you know, why aren't we or others copying that as opposed to tinkering at the edges with our own one? Because we seem to have done that many, many times. And I think from a member's viewpoint, we'd rather have something off the shelf that works rather than members portal version 5, you know, which we seem to be down at route a number of times. And obviously, if that's the case, putting LGR to one side, are there things that we could do in the short term? Because certainly from a member's perspective, we could get the members portal sorted out sooner rather than later. That would help us now, never mind LGR. Any thoughts on that, Spinner?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think the landscape of LGR as well has offered the opportunity to look at what's important and where do we just make our lives easier for a while as well. And sometimes digital isn't the right answer, and we state that quite clearly actually within the strategy. The members portal perhaps is one of those areas where you see it run best, or perhaps where it works most effectively for members. It's actually where there's a degree of manual support to it, and that tends to be where it works. So yeah, I think, again, Review Members Portal is about a whole process review as well, not necessarily just looking at the technology, because we can provide a technology solution that we can say the technology team works. That doesn't mean it works for the users. And I think that's what we need to be open to, is that we've tried to defend technology without probably working on the process and the culture alongside it where it comes to the Members Portal. So, yeah, it is, as I say, it's something we're actively looking at the moment about what do we do for the next couple of years around the members portal. It's not going to be worth spending significant money on it, yeah, we will feed back to members shortly once we've finalised those discussions.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to move to the vote on this item. We've moved and seconded the recommendation. All those in favour, please show. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to item 10, which is artificial intelligence, AI policy. And this is obviously an area which is much in the news at the moment. I'm going to move the recommendation. It's page 111 on your agendas. Do I have a seconder?
I will second the recommendations.
Okay. And I'm going to obviously pass Ms Bennett. I suppose the obvious question is, Ms Bennett, as with most things in this council, we need a policy on things. So hence, this is here. Yes? So please explain.
Yeah, this really for us is about how do we get all our foundations in place for AI, and the first thing is that we needed a policy that sort of sets the council's guidance on acceptable use in the workplace, how it should be adopted to ensure that we're getting benefits out of it while maintaining security, managing risk. So the purpose of the policy tonight is exactly that. It's not a technical commitment, it's not a plan for deployment, it's just a practical policy about safe and good use of AI. It's the first thing we need really to then be able to develop that business case on what does AI deployment potentially look like for us as a council. Within the report, we have made a commitment that we will be going away to build some use cases, particularly around the use of Copilot, and we will bring that report back once complete. But for tonight, it's just about getting that policy in place so that we've got our foundations ready for the future.
Right, and Ms Bennett, something that came up was mentioned to me. I welcome your comments on. With AI, obviously opens up a whole range of different issues. One of them obviously is security. We're talking about cyber security, but I know there have been instances where AI potentially has been used and it's caused breaches of security just because of the way it's been set up. So, you know, perhaps you can come to that a bit later, but that's one of the concerns that I had. I've got Councillor Barrett first and then Councillor Parker. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. I think this is an interesting and exciting area in general. My most interest actually is in point 3 in terms of AI tools. I know you mentioned Copilot, but at LGA events and also like at the UK government level, there's the Humphrey Suite with Redbox, Consult, various others that pretty much my day job tells me they're using 95% of the time to respond to me when I actually try to get hold of civil servants, because their responses are coming back faster and better than they used to in terms of government policy and positions, and they're very eloquently written of a certain tone. But are there any, back to the other points, in terms of pilots, are we piloting just stuff ourselves, or are we looking to LGA and Essex and beyond? So I think there are definitely use cases for us to look at in terms of AI, in terms of stakeholder analysis, in terms of consultation response, in terms of complaints to find matrices and key elements that we're not finding beforehand. And in turn, I think there's also a great opportunity in personas and other areas in terms of finding out what reactions would be to certain circumstances, situations, IT fails, whatever they may be. Although I am aware that the civil service are also using personas to decide how a minister would react to a policy. So we could have fun with councillor personas. How would Councillor Worsfold react to this? Which is actually, it's surprisingly good. However, I think it would be interesting to know what opportunities we're looking at more broadly, not for right now, but it would be fascinating to find that out. And in turn, I think from our side, if we can reach out asking what other councils are doing, see if we could pilot with as well, would be quite useful. But the only other point I had to make on this is I see the ethics element to it and reporting to it. I think there's going to be in the future a requirement that, I think there's fears of AI taking everyone's jobs moment, which I don't necessarily think will happen to a greater extent. I think it would just, like any industrial revolution, it would just change what jobs there are and what people do, and hopefully elevate the human level to the council, to the strategy, to the creativity, rather than necessarily some of the doing element, which is an advantage. But within our ethics policy, are we looking about how we acknowledge AI use in anything we produce? Take, for example, there's certain banks in responding will say this response has been developed or produced by AI. Are we thinking about doing that? And are we thinking back to, if a report is written partially by AI, are we saying AI has been used to help write this report, etc.? I think that it would be useful to have those acknowledgements, but in turn, it also a challenge. My one nightmare in my day job about AI is AI's ability for me to say, check these facts and find me sources to, like, if they are accurate, find me a source that's relevant, and the amount of sources that have been made up is slightly scary. In turn, I've proved lots of things about myself, apparently. If you can ask, has X or Y done this? Say, yes, here's an academic study that proves, which is nice, but not useful. So how are we going to be acknowledging AI use in what we do? And then in turn, the other question about what apps are we looking, what application are we looking at? Are we looking for partnerships? Are we looking to be a follower or a leader? So.
Well, thanks for that, Councillor Barrett. There's a lot of questions. I don't know how many you want to answer tonight. As I say, I think with this whole AI discussion, it's a bit like opening Pandora's box, because we could all go off in loads of directions. So, is there anything particularly you wanted to say at this point to Councillor Barrett? The points he's raised?
I think I could probably sum it up as we can't run before we can walk is probably the position we're at the moment. We are just looking at Copilot at the moment. There's intention behind that around security and that it's within our Microsoft tenancy. You know, there's a rationale behind that. But yeah, I think the business case that we develop once we've got the policy in place is about how do we identify those use cases, and I think that will give you some more of the information that you're looking for. Back to your disclosure point, within the policy it does state that we should identify and disclose content produced or generated via AI, and there is an example footnote there. That will need to be applied with discretion into, you know, to what degree has AI been used. But yet the policy does state that we would require, that being identified.
Just as a general point, Ms Bennett, in terms of obviously around I went to a finance course about 6 months ago, and while I was on that course, people were talking about AI. And they were saying about their council was doing this on AI and that on AI. You know, across the local authorities, is there much exchange of information amongst councils in terms of who's doing what on AI and how they're developing it? Is that happening all the time? Or?
Thanks, Chair. I'll direct to Ms Huggins if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. If we refer back to the Essex Digital Partnership, so there's been a long recognition of how powerful that could do, but also the dangers of it. So within the Essex Digital Partnership, there are subgroups on around cyber security and things like that, strategy, but there's also a data and AI one. So there's key people that sit on that, and it's looking at that combination, because it's a really good partnership, because AI will only work as good as the information that you feed it, hence, you know, hallucinations and things like this. But that's where we're sharing good practice across Essex. There's some great work coming out of Southend, where they're using AI to help with notes with social care and things like that. So yes, we are sharing good practice. We are understanding what we could do, and we're also always seeking of where either across Essex or just small groups can come together, either for financial commitments to contracts and things, or where we can share just best practice to deliver.
So, I mean, that's great, obviously, from an Essex perspective. I'm just thinking from a UK perspective, are we aware of council or councils that are really flying on this issue and have taken it almost on, you know, to a different level already? Is that happening?
So along with just looking locally within Essex, looking wider, we as an authority and many others across Essex, but across the country, are part of the innovation subgroup within Microsoft. But that's run by local authorities, and what they've done is not only are they sharing good practice, but they're also holding Microsoft to account. You're saying this, it doesn't work, we want it to this. So they're driving that technology and also sort of like sharing that good practice for free. They want to create what's good for local government and keep it inside local government as well.
Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, Chair. I take it AI didn't write the recommendations. I mean, it's a little bit scary, isn't it?
Trying to raise the bar, Councillor Parkin.
You know, I mean, we're going down a route where we don't know who we're talking to, and it's even more frightening because you're probably not going to be invited out to dinner by AI, where you normally would be if you was talking to somebody personally. The only serious observation I got is the recommendation 3. You did answer my question. You did in your run-up. You more or less said what I'd like to see, but it tells us what's going to happen, but it doesn't actually say that when the pilots have been worked on and so on and so forth, it will come back as a report to this or a particular panel. It just ends in mid-air to a certain extent, and you know, on R2 it says the normal with the chairman and finance resources committee etc. making decisions, but that final R3, I think it should actually say that when the report business case has been concluded, that will be offered to the panel or a panel, whether it's full council or whatever, as an item.
I take that point on board. I will amend R3 to say that it will come back to committee, to the appropriate committee. Okay, you say it could be full council,
it could be
this committee.
But we'll have to ask our AI where it's going.
Sorry? Have to ask AI. Thanks very much, Councillor Parkin. Yeah. Right. So we will amend, if we can, that R3. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to a point made by Councillor Barrett regarding fact checking. So obviously I understand about disclosure, but if we're going to use AI, are we going to make sure that we fact check the content first? Because obviously, as what happened in the summer, the Chicago Sun-Times asked one of their journalists to do an article regarding books to read for the summer, and he used AI, and the majority of those books didn't exist, nor the author. So then obviously the Chicago Sun-Times had to put out another article apologising the fact that they'd put out factually incorrect information. So Councillor Barrett raises a very I know, I'm sorry, I am sorry. So Councillor Barrett does raise, that was AI, Councillor Barrett. So it's just, will we ensure part of the policy will be to fact check whatever we use with AI?
Ms Bennett, would you like to answer it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it states within the policy, users remain accountable for all outputs generated by AI. Remember the product, we are talking about Copilot specifically here, remember the product is called Copilot, you are the pilot and you are in control. That's the statement we're using frequently with officers at the moment, that's where Copilot does help because its name assists us. So yeah, the policy does make that quite clear, thank you.
I'm going to move to the vote now. Everyone's spoken and wished to speak. We have the recommendations before us. R3 has been amended to ensure it comes back to committee, okay, with the wording. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. Right, move on to item 11, which is the 25-26 Q1 performance. And these are reports that relate to the corporate plan and give us an update in terms of how we are doing against the corporate plan. One of the issues you may have picked up if you've attended assets or some of the other meetings is some of these issues have been spread across one or two committees because under the headings they can apply to one or two committees. And I think what's happening, Mr Campbell, is fine-tuning this on an ongoing basis to ensure the correct committee has the correct report. Can't always be easy, but I'm going to move. I think we're noting. I've got a recommendation there. I'm going to move the recommendation. We've got R1, okay, and I've got a seconder.
Yes, I'll Second.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask Ms Campbell if he's got anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing really further to add, but you've summed it up. This is the first quarter of performance that relates to this committee. I wish this had come earlier before the annual complaints one. I think then we could have seen it in action, because these are the regular reports you're going to get on a quarterly basis. They sum up the projects that fall under this remit, the performance and the complaints that fall under this committee's responsibilities. It is a working document. It's the first time we brought it, so we are working on comments or feedback so we can improve this for the next time that it comes through to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think through going through the detail, I think what's very positive is we've got a number of items which are on green or on complete, which that is good, and we've obviously got the level of detail there as well, so we can look and drill down where we need to on a number of areas. I've got Councillor Hurst to speak first.
Yep, no, thank you, Chair, thank you, Mr. Campbell. Really, I absolutely agree with you. Really, it needs to come before the complaints piece, and we need to tie up as well the action plans here with the action plans in the complaints piece, just to try and understand what's going to happen. I've really got 3 points to make on three of the items here. Page 139, collection rates, page 140, customer service response, and page 145, information governance. Same point really applies to all three, which is they're pretty important. If they keep going in the wrong direction, they are going to be quite a big problem for us, particularly collection rates. But information governance could do the same. In the action plan, in the improvement plan that you have here, it doesn't tell us that you think you can turn the trend with what you're planning to do. I think there is a real need to understand better whether what you have here is going to make things better, or whether it's simply going to slow the rate of deterioration. Please.
Campbell.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Hurst, what I'm hearing is we need to get better detail on the commentary that actually refers to, while we're putting these actions into place, what's the outcome going to be once we do that?
Thank you for that question. I know one area I and other members have touched on is residents contacting the council, particularly using the phone. I think Councillor Parker touched on it earlier. It's very, very important because there are a number of particularly elderly residents who aren't able to contact us via the internet. They want to come through by phone, and how quickly the phone's answered and how quickly they're referred on is important. And that is an area we need to look at constantly to try and get it as tight as we can do, because we all know source of frustration, phoning anywhere up and waiting ages to get a response is frustrating. So, yeah, I understand. I mean, there are certain items here, obviously, which are very front-facing, very resident-facing, and if they're working, great. If they're not, you soon know it. So, you know, we need to be tight on those. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points, but one of the first point I'd like to make, I'm actually looking at this on my laptop, and obviously this report is actually colour-coded, so it may be just a benefit going forward that you have this report on screens going forward. But it's with regards to pages 135 and 136, the box overlaps 2 pages, and I can't read the third line neither on my screen or actually on the report. So it's obviously just one to make sure that the boxes are on complete pages, and then still staying with that point where it says an artist has been commissioned, designed wayfinding signage. 1, the cost for that, and 2, concepts are expected to be shown to councillors in September. Has that happened?
Thank you, Councillor Slade. That's why I love you being on this committee, because you'll spot these things. So thank you for that. It's very helpful. I'm sure the office is very grateful. Ms Campbell, do you have any comment you'd like to make?
I do. It's regretfully not a positive one in terms of I can tell you this evening, so I'll have to take it offline and I'll have to come back to you. No, apologies, Chair.
No,
apologies.
We'll come back on that. Okay, but thanks for raising it. Councillor Barrett.
Just respond on the wayfinding item. there's elements that have come back to council administration side, but internal presentation went to Brentwood Business Partnership in terms of, which Councillor Poppy was on as well, in terms of the progress of that to date, where we're up to, etc. So we wanted to get business engagement at an early stage, and that's been led by the economic development team very successfully. And in terms of our own local commissioning element of it, that's the next stage to come back. The concepts, the idea is there and agreed. It's actually just how we make sure it's uniquely Brentwood. And in the spirit of LGR, etc., we're still making sure it's uniquely Brentwood, and whoever succeeds will have to deal with it.
Ms Campbell.
Is that okay, Councillor? So I won't need to come back on that, but I do take the point about the cut bit, and thank you, Councillor Barrett, for that.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers.
Vote on that. All those in favour, please show.
Chair, Mr. Chair.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Item 12 is the Q1 budget update, which starts on page 147. I'm going to move the recommendation on page 147. That's R1, R2 and R3. Do I have a seconder?
I will second those three recommendations.
Thank you. I think, as you can see from the report, we are in quite a strong financial position compared to a number of other local authorities. And you'll see on R2, we're looking at transferring 3.5 million to the in-borough regeneration reserve. And the idea behind that is we have three quite clear priorities, which are no particular order, but Baytree, Brentwood Centre, and obviously the depot, which we need to address. And we are obviously constantly looking at the costings on those. And we're obviously putting money to one side because it is a moving feast on costings and projected costings. And we, as an administration, want to ensure that we have some money to one side to support those. So that's why that change is being made there. We've also agreed to the in-year transfer of 250k to the Brentwood Centre Redevelopment Reserve. Mr Dickinson, before we open to questions, do you have anything you wish to add, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just conscious that it's nearly the end of Q2, so just sort of give an update that the current forecast based on period 5 is very similar to this, so there hasn't been any major changes from there. And then just to emphasise that a lot of the surplus that's been generated has been from what we call exceptional one-off interest income that will likely reduce over the next few years as we invest the money in some of those schemes that have been mentioned. So that's why it's not appropriate maybe to change the budget based on that income, but to put the money into reserve to use for the capital programme.
Okay, so I'm open to questions. Any questions at all? Councillor Slade and Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions relating to page 149, and in particular, so if I start with points 15, 16, 17 and 22, where those items all list overspends. So, number one, do we actually have the budget for those items? The percentage of the overspend and the breakdown of the actual overspend. With regards to point 16, we've an overspend of 348,000. Currently 9 agency staff. So are we using one agency for this? And if so, where are they based? But with that level of overspend, would it have not been better for this council that we actually recruited? With point 18, income forecaster budget, however, invoicing is currently delayed with a backlog. Do we know why the invoicing is delayed and the backlog? And is it still the case, obviously, when this report was written, the income was forecast a budget, but has there been an update for the committee this evening? What greatly concerns me, though, the points 15, 16, 17 and 22 are all the responsibility of one director, and if I'm correct, they are all for the Director of Environment. So who approved these overspends, and were these intentional overspends?
Right, there's a lot of questions there, Councillor Slade, which was always welcome.
And can I just add the final point? Those overspends add up to £705,000. So that's a total of nearly £750,000.
Thank you. What I would say is this, I'm going to ask Ms Dickinson obviously to try and answer some of those points. It may be a situation where you may need to put some of them in writing, I'd say, to get a detailed response, because it's quite difficult, or we pick it up obviously on the stream here, but it's quite difficult obviously taking all those points down and answering them all in one go. Totally relevant questions, they need to be answered. Ms Dixon, I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of what you can answer tonight or what you'd like to take away, so I'll leave that to you.
I might need to come back on some of those. Just a first point is, say, 15 is point 15, that's a summary, so that the overspend, that's for the whole of cleaner, greener and safer. And then underneath there are subtotals that lead into that figure. That's the one in bold is the actual forecast. And then, say, 16, 17 is part of that same figure. And
16 is an overspend of 348,000. Go on.
Yeah, sorry, Ms Dixon, taking on board Councillor Slade's point, I mean, if you took it literally what's there, okay, in front of you, the figures don't add up. I understand that Councillor Barrett said there obviously relates to things elsewhere. Yeah. So, Ms Dixon, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I understand the point you're making. I think Councillor Slade does as well, but it's just how it adds up. And
yeah, so that's the case. So there are the lines. These are just the main items that we would highlight to produce a fairly short report. The other thing to note is that it's Q1, so there is work happening on some of these areas. So we only forecast what we know is the current situation. There's been some work to reduce the number of agency staff, and then that worked for a bit, and then I think some of there was a bit of staff turnover in the service, and so they've gone back to getting some agency staff in to cover it. But I understand the director is working towards reducing that. It's just we would not forecast that just yet. We would forecast and hopefully we'll work towards reducing that over the year. But currently there is a pressure there, and there is a requirement to use agency staff.
so just to be clear, so what you're saying, Ms Dixon, is on clean and green, the net figure, if you like, is overspend of 137 when you take into account all the things that are overspent or underspent, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
And that's obviously the same for the thriving and growing economy, where we've got an 883 underspend, yeah? When you take all those points into consideration, obviously a place called home as well. So, you know, it is possible, obviously, to drill down in more details, but those, I presume, are the key highlights in those different areas. Yeah?
That's correct.
Okay. Right. Okay. So what I'd say, Councillor Slade, if there are others that you want to go on, perhaps email in to Ms Dixon, yeah, if you can, and then we can get some answers on those, yeah? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of the questions have been answered, and some of the questions I was going to make have already been put forward. But just reiterating on what we have in front of us, you know, these broad statements are not very helpful in terms of, you know, it might be several items being added together, whatever it is, but clean and green, 137k, it would make sense if it was laid out in terms of why we had that, you know, whether they had to renew fences or whatever it was, so that it's just not, it almost comes down to the fact that on the previous page where there's a balanced budget and certainly a surplus of income, it almost looks as though somebody's gone, well, we're making money over there, so we can lose money here. And that is not the way the council should work. bedding plants, why have we overspent on bedding plants? The answer would be if it said that we've put up more hanging baskets or we've done this or done that, not just the fact that we've overspent or that the price has gone up tenfold from last year. Just the overspend, and I take Councillor Slade's, I think we talked about it between ourselves earlier on, that the agency cost, now we know that the depot is, I won't say in serious trouble, but it's not working very well at the moment, and there's a lot of agency staff. I mean, I'm continuously phoning up because roads have been missed and so on and so forth when the vans are out, and I'm told, well, sorry, the driver didn't know the route and so on and so forth. I understand that, and it does happen, but 3,408k, as Councillor Slade said, surely it would be better if we was investing money, serious money, into trying to get permanent staff there and not relying on agency staff. When I've employed agency staff, I don't know how it works with the depot and the council, but it cost me twice as much for an agency person. Usually they're quite better skilled because that's why they're agency people, but they don't earn you any more money, and that costs you twice as much as it would if you was employing somebody. So, you know, I try to avoid not having agency staff, period, and I think we should be doing the same.
Mr Dixon, I'll just touch on this. Obviously, we've got Councillor Worsfold with us, who's the chair of Clean and Green, but I'm not on Clean and Green, so I don't know exactly what happens on there. But where we've got a situation with Clean and Green, like we've got here, these different headings, I'm just wondering, Councillor Worsfold, because I haven't been running committees for a while, but just in terms of how much detail you're drilling down to at committee level on some of these areas and looking at it, or is it more top level with the director?
Well, thank you very much. I did indicate to speak, so thank you for bringing me in. The proportion of staff at the depot that are agency staff has been managed down quite significantly over the last year. There are some aspects, some areas of the work that is done out of the depot that would over-dependent on agency staff. And the director has been managing that. Recruiting for a lot of those roles is very, very hard. There isn't, I've spoken to Mr Houghton on many occasions about this, there is not a magic wand that says we can switch from having agency staff to having permanent staff just like that. There aren't the people out there. We've talked about apprenticeship schemes and things like that. There are other ideas in the pipeline. I do think it'd probably be quite useful at a future Clean and Green to have a report on the trends in terms of the mix of permanent and agency staff. I'd throw in one point, because you touched on, Chair, on the priorities for the big spending, Baytree Centre, Brentwood Centre and the depot. One aspect of the depot that hits me quite hard when I go there, and I've been to one or two other depots in Essex, there are some really quite good ones. Uttlesford have recently moved into new premises, is the quality of facilities for the staff. They make us look as if we're in the 19th century, frankly. And I do think that makes it a bit harder to get people to come and work there. I think if the canteen facilities, if the restrooms and so on are of a much higher quality, if we can invest in that, I think it'll make it easier to recruit and retain good quality staff. So I think some of these things actually go together, but there is a concerted drive to fill vacancies with permanent staff, because I think Councillor Slade mentioned people don't know the routes. If you have to suddenly recruit an agency driver and put them out on a route, every route has its little quirks. The assisted collections, the little the little byways off the roads and so on and so forth. Yeah, if you don't know them, like the back of your hand, it's inevitable things are going to be missed. And that probably explains some of the complaints that we've recorded under the heading of waste in the report we saw earlier on. So there is a lot of work going on, but I do agree, I think it'd be quite useful for all members to have a report on the staffing trends, because I think that will help people understand the direction of travel, and that the direction of travel is very positive. We're not there, it's going to take a long time, because the people that want to do those sort of jobs are not out there, and we can't change that.
Thanks for that. I've got Councillor Hurst next.
Thank you, Chair. I'll build a bit on the points that have just been made, but a few of my own later as well. So I think it's really interesting, isn't it? So we've had a budget report here which has been really helpful and revealing, and helped us focus on the fact that the depot's in a bit of a mess, that there is stuff that needs to be done there, and we're ending up with an overspend there against underspends elsewhere. And I think having a report back, as you suggest, is a really positive thing to be thinking of doing. I would just say on top of that, and no one likes I told you so, but our alternative budget that we put forward before the beginning of the year made the point that we needed to spend more on the depot, that we needed to spend more on clean and green, which is what we are doing, and that we would be able to afford to do so because our estimates of the income and alternative expenditure were different from what you have here. So from my perspective, I'm hearing a bit about the fact that this has kind of happened anyway. My strong recommendation would be to grip it, because I think this money needs to be spent in this area. The borough needs it, and the depot needs it, and the workforce need it. That would be where I'd be coming from on that one. I think there are, if I make all the points at one, and then you can, sorry, I didn't need to speak over you, Chair. I think there are a couple of other points that perhaps need to be teased out of this report, and the point I think is in the other areas, just parking the large one-off interest income for a minute, it's quite clear that much of this underspend is driven, that the 1.36 million, which isn't interest or funding, is actually driven by vacancies. So my core question is, what are we experiencing there? Are we finding that it is really hard because there's a general lack of people in the county who are looking for jobs? Are we finding it hard because local government reorganisation is meaning people don't want to come and work for a council? Are we finding it hard in a particular area of this council? Or it looks as though it's more broad than that, actually. It looks as though we've got an issue with vacancies across the piece. And these aren't vacancies that we planned or vacancies that we're having to manage the vacancy factor because we haven't got the money. Actually, it's generating a surplus for us. So that really is my core question. Then a couple of additional questions, really. On page 150, we mentioned the decline in the net non-domestic rates base because of the switch of office space into residential. But I know from when I did what you're doing, Chair, and the panel, the administration do, actually we don't get to keep much of net non-domestic rates. Most of that goes off to central government. Are we actually not better off as a council taking it as residential council tax rather than as net non-domestic rates? I don't know what the math is there. That may be a question that Mr Dickinson may want to take away and reflect upon and come back with an answer in due course. And then the final bit, which again is a straight question, is transferring 3.5 million into the regen and 250,000 into where's my recommendation gone? The Brentwood Centre Redevelopment Reserve. Are they revenue reserves or capital reserves? Because I think we need to be very careful not to transfer them into reserves that we can't spend how we want to spend. If we make them into capital reserves, we'll be restricting ourselves.
Mr Dixon, could you just answer that last point, just on the reserve for us? Just clarify that first, please.
So it'll be a revenue reserve.
Thank you. Just in terms of some of the other points you've raised, Councillor Hurst, in terms of the depot, I mean, the issues with the depot haven't just started the last couple of years. Historically, the depot has needed addressing, and that's why it's one of the three key priorities of this administration to put the resource into bringing the depot up to a standard. There are compliance issues which whoever has run this council need to address, those compliance issues at the depot. We are taking it by the scruff of the neck. We are going to address those compliance issues, and the money's going to be invested. And we've made a commitment there on the priorities that we've said. I think the good thing is with the priorities, there are obviously different phases for different priorities. So be it the depot, there are certain things which are a definite priority which need to be fixed and addressed, which, as I say, whoever's run the council would need to do that. I think the second thing on vacancies, again, vacancies historically in this council, we've had vacancies for a number of years. Planning is a major issue across the UK, planning vacancies. There's a major shortage on the planning side. It's not just Brentwood, it's all over. And it's retaining planners, you know, keeping people and obviously new people coming through.
Historically not to the tune of £1.36 million.
Well, we can go back and look at some figures, but that's by the way. We are where we are, okay? We are where we are, and you know there have been vacancies over a long period of time. I think, from my perspective, obviously the action we took regarding the Phoenix loans, the fact that we've got our general fund debt down, point up at the LGR debate we had. That is a big shift for this council. This council, as you know, has been carrying an awful lot of debt. Under this administration, we have got it down substantially. Obviously, a lot of that's been related back to the sale of Childerditch, yeah? But compared to what's happened previously, historically, our debt is majorly down compared to what it's been before, which has to be good news for our residents and for this council. So, you know, we have made those decisions. As I touched on at LGR, you know, we know previous administration purchased Childerditch with our unanimous support. We made the decision with most support from the opposition side, but we made the decision, but we still had to make that decision to sell it, which is a big decision to make because it could have gone a number of ways. I know Councillor Parker at the time, I won't misquote him, but I know he had sincere reservations about going down that route, but we made that decision. It's obviously worked out at this moment in time, the positive one for all of this council and for our residents, okay? But it could have gone either way.
May I make the point that you're not answering my question now, because I agreed with you on that in what I was saying.
Okay, no, but I'm just making that point to you about general fund debt. We're talking about that, okay? Ms Dixon, is there anything else that Councillor Ellis has raised that you wanted to cover?
Just on the 1.3, so part of that is parking income. So parking income is I think it's around about 400,000. So that it's still a big amount. And then quite a lot of growth was agreed in February, and I think it's taken a bit of time just to recruit to those posts. And some of those posts we're looking to recruit to are around the asset side, where there's potential to capitalise the cost as well. So I think there's probably a little bit more to it, but there are quite a bit of vacancies that are being filled now. But that was where we were as at the forecast.
Okay, Councillor Barrett, next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth, as when we reflect that, on the figures here, that these are, we actually have a budget update at this point in the year when we didn't historically for the last few years for various difficulties, so thank you for that. Thank you for its level of accuracy and information. In terms, also the overspends are, unless I am very, I'm not wrong, so I've gone back and checked the previous reports, are actually at lower levels than previous budget updates over the last 4 years. And in terms of variation of 137 will be well into a range of being really quite good compared to a few years ago in general. In terms of staff overspend, 348,000, It should be noted that's depot management admin, that isn't actually waste, so that's not the bin men, it's the admin side of it. In turn, the February staff update showed there were 11 vacancies in that sector, there's now 5, so that shows a decrease, a positive move forward. In that case, an example as well, so actually people have been recruited. There has also been several rounds of recruitment for those roles that have been unsuccessful. In building control, there's currently an advert out for a building control manager, which is the second time of advertising, because despite advertising it at local government rates, people didn't apply for it, and this is the challenge we have with recruitment. And in turn, going through other elements of this, also to Councillor Hurst's point, while he is quite accurate in the budget amendment the Conservatives put forward in 2024, there were 2 extra roles for the depot. In 2025, there wasn't, because they were in the growth bid, the 75,000. There wasn't actually an extra depot staff. Those 2 roles that were created actually haven't been filled yet. I have gone and checked your amendment to make sure that was the case. You did have them in the 24 amendment, the 25 amendment. You had a waste service line, but not 2 extra roles, 2 extra recruitment. It was for bulky waste collections and removing the charge. I've checked. But nevertheless, point in turn, there is an opportunity to recruit more staff there. The challenge we have with agency across the board is that we know this is a local government challenge and problem, especially in the east of England. We know we have the drag of London for lots of our local government employees in terms of paying a higher London weighting that we can't necessarily compete with. And actually, it should be acknowledged from the staffing survey earlier in this year that came to this committee in March, I believe, we have the lowest use of agency in the depot that we've had for the previous 5 years. So all of those things are positive and progressive. Your points are accurate. Progress is being made, and we should actually acknowledge progress rather than necessarily point out where things can still get better in turn. So whilst we are looking for improvement, we should also acknowledge the progress that is being made to make a more full-time and increasing the full-time basis of our staff with less overspends, which is a very positive level of progress, and we should keep doing that. We shouldn't necessarily just demonise why haven't things worked when the amount of progress being made in the last 2 years is dramatic compared to the previous 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Well, appreciate you I think in fairness, Councillor Barrett, he's got pretty much right there, particularly No, but I give him his due. I think particularly regarding your amendments, I think you've got things pretty right there, actually. But no, Councillor Barrett got things right. No, it would take a lot for me to say. Right, okay. Thank you. Good. Right, we're moving swiftly on. Councillor Slade, I know it's going to be short and succinct.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak again.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, before you go, I'm going to move standing orders. All those in favour, please show. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about it. Thank you. Right, Councillor Slade.
Sorry, it was just one to say that I do agree with Councillor Worsfold, and I would welcome that if this could come back to clean and green, because obviously the director himself is not here to address these issues. But likewise, when the report states that there's 9 agency staff to cover 5 posts, it possibly goes back to Councillor Parker's point that we've basically got double the agency staff that would cover 5 vacant posts. But is that because they're being paid more? And likewise, going back to another point of Councillor Parker, I'm of the understanding that this agency staff are coming from Ipswich, which then would explain as to why people don't know the route, which then expands into another point that why don't we utilise the staff from Rochford? So, and also going on to Councillor Barrett, thank you obviously for your comprehensive answers, but that goes back to the point earlier that this is just very generic and it maybe just needs a bit more information.
I think, well, okay. In fairness to Mr Dickinson and the finance team, this, if you like, is giving you an overview. It's possible, as always, to drill down to numbers. Now, we can only go to a certain level of detail here. As you say, we haven't got all directors here, whatever. There are opportunities to discuss those things and look at those things. Even on a one-to-one basis, you going and seeing director or having a meeting with Councillor Worsfold, whatever. So I think, in terms of the report we've got here, it is a clear report in terms of direction of travel, where we're going. But if you want more detail, probably offline, we need to get to that stage. I think, as with all these things, we are where we are at the moment. The general trend or the general direction is a positive one. We are moving forward with the opportunities that have arisen from different decisions that have been made. But I think on vacancies, we need to monitor that. With regard to agency staff, I mean, you know, whatever the profession, be it nursing or whatever, agency staff, there's a lot of agency staff obviously are getting more money than people who work full-time in the NHS, as I'm often told. So, yeah, I mean, that's a whole separate issue. Listen, I'm going to go to Councillor Parker. I did have you down. A small point you wanted to make or not?
Yeah, two things actually. One is that, I mean, I had this problem when I was involved with the depot. And basically, I don't know whether it still applies. The officer will probably tell me that we're still hampered by grades, and that's how much we pay our staff. So if we're sticking to the grade system, it means that we can't increase their wages and so forth. The other thing is that what's changed from early days is the shortage of HGV drivers and the fact that companies are poaching HGV drivers from, you know, all over the country because there is a huge shortage of them. And I wouldn't be suggesting this if it wasn't for the amount of money we're talking about, 300k. That another thing we should be looking at is whether we pay HGV drivers what is considered the current rate, which would probably be outside the grade that we have for council payments. But I think we should be looking to move along those lines. But having said all that, it might be completely irrelevant because I think you said, and so did somebody else say, that we're where we are. Well, we're not where we are because we don't know where we're going. So at the end of the day, talking about doing the depot and so on and so forth, I think the depot is on hold. We try and improve what we've got, but it's on a hold because if we're going to be a 3, 4 or whatever joined up unitary, the depot might not even exist in Brentwood, it might be somewhere else. So I don't think we should be investing money for something that we don't know where the future is going to take us.
Well, let me assure Councillor Parker, you know, in terms of investing money with the depot or any other area, we will look at obviously things from a compliance perspective in terms of what we need to do, regardless who's running the council between now and LGR, to make sure that the depot is fit for standard. Okay, yeah, it's fit for purpose, and it delivers the basics, if you like, that it needs to deliver. The point you say in terms of LGR, who knows where the depot might be going forward? Could be here, could be split, who knows? So it's a question of obviously looking at, and in terms of priorities, there's a situation, it's a bit like statutory spending, you know, a situation where some monies, I'm sure Ms Barnes or Councillor Barrett can tell us, some monies will need to be spent on the depot. Yeah, there'll be varying degrees in terms of what we spend. We've then got the Brentwood Centre, we've then got obviously the Bay Tree, and there's going to be business plans, etc., which come to the Asset Committee with the detail on those specific proposals in terms of the funding and everything else that's going to be involved, okay? But, you know, the depot, in terms of resident interest, I should think the depot's way, way down the list in terms of where I'd like to see money invested. But there will be a case of what we need to do and what we have to do to, as I say, keep it compliant and keep it going. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. Let me come back in and just very quickly and I hear Councillor Parker's point to an extent. We don't know the future of the depot and other facilities. In turn, we do know different arrangements of other local authorities, and depending on where decisions go, different things can happen. Jump, for example, is an in-house collection. Malden, for example, is in a 7-year contract that can't be expanded or can't be left, and probably wouldn't be favourable to us. But the one certainty we do know that is if our depot isn't compliant and modern, it won't be in Brentwood in the longer term. So actually, it's a risk, but the only way we're actually in the game is with a modern and up-to-date and compliant depot. So that's the way, do we want to be in the game or do we not? And I recognise that's a judgment call because it might not work, but the position of the administration is we need to be in that game as far as we possibly can, and trying to have a depot that serves the local community, knows routes better, etc., is a positive effort to try to make if it can work. But I recognise your concerns, and it is a chancing our arm to some extent, but I think it's a chance worth taking.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to the vote now on this item. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. We then move on to item 13, which is budget setting guidelines. This is a report on page 161 of the agenda. I'm going to move the recommendations. I think this is very useful, this report, because obviously it sets out clearly in terms of some of the key dates, and it gives obviously members across the chamber an idea as to how we're proposing to move forward with our budget preparations. I'm going to move the recommendation. Have we got a seconder for that?
I will second the recommendations.
Thank you. Ms Dixon, anything you wish to add on the budget setting guidelines?
Thank you, Chair. No, but I'm willing to take questions.
Any questions from members on the budget setting guidelines? Councillor Hurst.
Yeah, just briefly, one really. So I really welcome the report, good to have it laid out, good to have know how we're going to approach it. Page 166, the page 166, there are actual dates beside when the joint administration is getting their briefings and just months beside the rest of us. Can I please have assurance that we will have proper access to Mr Dickens and his team so that we can actually formulate our own ideas about how to take this council forward?
Yes. Of course you can, Councillor Hurst. Yeah. I'm going to move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. We now move into item 14, which is exclusion of the press and the public. You can let me know